Welcome everybody. My name is Mario Novelli. I'm the Director of the Centre for International Education and co-PI of the Peer Network. Welcome everyone to week 7 of the Peer Network lecture series on the political economy of education in times of conflict, crisis and pandemics. This is a GCRF AHRC funded network between the Centre for International Education, the University of Sussex, the University of Cape Town, Nazarbayev University, Kazakhstan, and the University of Ulster, and aims to promote engagement with critical political economy analysis of education in contexts of conflict and crisis. The lecture series is also supported by UCFIET, the UK Forum on International Education and Training. All of our lectures are live streamed through YouTube and available afterwards, and will become part of a free open source resource for all those interested in learning and sharing knowledge and practice about the political economy of education. Please sign up to our YouTube, our CIE YouTube. I'm very happy to say that today's session is led by Professor Mehmet Ur from the University of Greenwich and Dr. Birgül Kutan, University of Sussex. The title of this session is Academics for Peace and the Political Economy of Repression in Turkey's Higher Education Sector. Before I introduce them, I want to briefly run through a few housekeeping rules and logistics. Please mute yourselves unless you are asking a question in the Q&A. Please ask any questions during the talk through the chat function, and I'll collate those and come back later to request you to ask the question. They will talk for around 35 to 40 minutes. We'll then have a 7-minute Sussex buzz in small breakout rooms so that you can reflect on the content of the lecture. We'll then come back as a plenary, as a group for a plenary Q&A. We'll try to finish around 2:15 p.m. UK time. Just a few words of introduction. Professor Mehmet Ur is a professor of economics and institutions and a specialist in political economy at the University of Greenwich, which he joined in 1990. He has led a number of research projects funded by the European Commission, the Department for International Development, the Economic and Social Research Council. He's also a convener for the Cochrane and Campbell Collaboration's Economics Methods Group and coordinator of the Centre for Economic Performance, Governance and Regulation in the Business School, and has published widely. Apart from an exemplary academic career, Mehmet is also a political activist and has spent several years in prison for his activism in Turkey before coming to the UK and building a life for himself and his family. He remains active in politics in Turkey, a regular contributor to media outlets in Turkey and Europe, and is himself a signatory to the Academics for Peace statement that is the focus of this lecture, that led to so many academics becoming persecuted and imprisoned. He has a PhD in economics from the London School of Economics. Dr. Birgül Kutan is a researcher at the University of Sussex and is currently leading research on a case study of HDK, the People's Democratic Congress in Turkey, for a 4-country ESRC-funded study on learning and knowledge production in social movements that explores social movement learning in Turkey, Colombia, Nepal, and South Africa. And this lecture today is tangential to some of the research and part of the data that was gathered during that period. After working for the Turkish Human Rights Association in Turkey, Birgül came to the UK in the late 1990s. She has 2 master's degrees in development studies and society and space, and a PhD in human geography from the University of Bristol. The Zoom is yours, Mehmet.
Thank you very much, Mario. I'm very pleased to be part of this peer network lecture series. I followed some of the sessions, and I hope we will rise to the expectations that the series has established. We will do this in a couple of parts, a few parts. First, we will. I'll start with background to the Academics for Peace initiative in Turkey. And my focus will be really on some issues that remain behind the blind spot in conventional political economy of higher education research, so-called modernization theory. My presentation starts with an observation that the modernization theory's emphasis on higher education as a bulwark against autocracy is well known. And there are two main arguments in this debate. One is that authoritarian regimes tend to be hostile towards higher education in general, and higher education in particular, because they argue that the higher the level of education, the lower the probability of authoritarian or regimes or military coups or autocracies. And knowing that, authoritarian regimes tend to distance itself or underfund the higher education. The other argument in this debate is that disaffected higher education graduates and intellectuals are usually important actors or opposition actors against non-democratic regimes. I think although there are examples of academics, intellectuals' participation in resistance against anti-democratic regimes, the attempt to depict a picture of higher education system as a source of resistance for democracy or demand for democracy is misplaced, because there is equally important evidence suggesting that higher education graduates or higher education staff or institutions are under the influence of the autocratic or otherwise regimes. These regimes and the states in general tries to win the allegiance of the intelligentsia by various means. Also, they make sure, or they try to ensure, that the higher education system produces an army of conformist graduates, and these graduates are usually employed in the reproduction of the autocratic rules. I think if you look at the education background of the people who sustain the Trump autocracy, you will see a lot of evidence in that, let alone countries like Turkey or China, where the state intervention and design of the higher education is more obvious. What's the evidence emerging globally on this conformity and complicity? University management and regulatory higher education bodies are at the forefront in many countries of the assault against academic freedom. We saw that in Turkey, we saw that in Hungary, there is evidence of that in China and Russia and other countries. Science departments are striking alliances with authoritarian regimes or governments in general to close down or marginalize social science and humanities departments, particularly those engaged in the production of critical knowledge. Even in Europe and elsewhere, where the regime is not openly autocratic, university managers and academics, many academic colleagues, are encouraging and engineering the encroachment of neoliberalism into universities, particularly under the trend known as managerialism in higher education. Now, coming back to Turkey. Now, the state fetishism and nationalism in Turkey, what I call, is about the naked attempt at designing and shaping higher education in the image of a nationalist, xenophobic, and monolithic Turkish state. The preamble to the Turkish constitution says no protection shall be afforded to thoughts or opinions, later amended as activity, contrary to Turkish national interest, existence of Turkey as a monolithic state, and historical and moral values of Turkishness. This is the most blatant statement of nationalism and xenophobia that you can see in any constitution in the world. The state of Turkey, with its territory and nation, is an indivisible entity. Its language is Turkish. The reference here is against the Kurds. This is a fixture of the Turkish constitution since 1923. Denial of the existence of other ethnicities in Turkey, apart from those recognized under the laws and agreement, which are usually religious minorities, and the Armenians. It is also forbidding the use of other languages than Turkish officially. More than that, these articles and the preambles are irrevocable. No government or no majority you have in the parliament is enough to change this, unless you have a very strong social movement behind the demand for change. This state fetishism and nationalism is translated directly into the higher education law. The aim of the higher education law, higher education, is to educate students so that they are conscious of the privilege of being a Turk. This is again the most blatant statement of nationalism and ideology-driven education. The aim of the higher education is also to enhance the welfare of the Turkish state, not the Turkish citizen, the Turkish state. Of course, this framework has meant that resistance to state fetishism and monolithism, nationalism in Turkish higher education has been punished heavily. I will talk a little bit about the resistance to that, but the picture as of last year was that there were more than 70,000 students in jails, most of them Kurdish. Now, how did we come here? We came here because historically, majority of academics in Turkey, and I'm here maybe generalizing a bit, but I would stand behind my statement. Most of the academics in Turkey, I'm sorry to say that, have been the products and reproducers of nationalism in Turkey. There has been exceptions, which I will talk. These academics are usually mediocre. They have conformed and collaborated with the state design to secure promotion and status. They have functioned as ideologues and rather than the producers of critical thinking. The constitution that I cited earlier, the Turkish higher education law, are all drafted by law school graduates in Turkey. And they were awarded professorship even though they don't have any international publication, usually. Anyway, the picture is not dark all the times. There have been an honorable minority, has been an honorable minority that always took risks, defended academic freedom. There are examples stretching back to the 1960s. In the 1960s, sociologists like Behija Boran, Niyazi Berkes, etc., have raised the demands for academic freedom, argued for critical thinking, and they were punished. This was continued in 1970s, and therefore, after the military coup 1971, lots of academics, including some of the names that I mentioned here, Yakup Kepenek, who was my economics teacher in METU, Bahri Savcı, Korkut Borata, who's still active economist in Siyasal Bilgiler Fakültesi, Bülent Taner, İsmail Beşikçi, a foremost researcher on Kurdish issue in Turkey or Kurdish problem. Then in 1980s and 90s, this resistance expanded as more and more academics from Turkey established contacts, secured funding for studying abroad, and bringing in the standards that they have been trained with their professors, which are usually critical academics, to Turkey. Also, student activism increased. Students staged boycotts, occupations. They established links with trade unions and grassroots resistance to ensure that the mediocrity and the conformity with Turkish nationalist agenda did not dictate what they learn and what they study in higher education. I had the good fortune of being involved in two of these boycotts, one of which lasted for 6 months and one lasted for 9 months in the Middle East technical universities. The first boycott led to the very first establishment of student council. The second occupation derailed the state project to appoint a fascist nationalist rector to the university. One observation I have, and I shared this several times so far, the research and teaching quality has been higher, consistently higher, in universities and faculties where there was a resistance against state nationalism and fetishism. In all others, as you go up in the conformity scale, the quality of teaching and the quality of research goes down. Academics for Peace initiative emerged against this background in Turkey. When the Turkish government bombed and shelled Kurdish towns and cities in 2016, early 2016, more than 2,000 academics issued a declaration calling for an end to the state violence in Kurdish provinces, for drawing a roadmap that would lead to a lasting peace in Turkey, and allowing independent observers to monitor the Kurdish areas by the Kurdish towns and cities destroyed by security forces. This was too much for the autocratic regime of Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Justice and Development Party. They initiated a concerted attack by presidency, the government, the Higher Education Council, and the Research Council. Massive witch hunt, which led to mass dismissals, persecution, what we call social death, meaning exclusion from the labor market, and other issues that maybe will be mentioned by Birgül. now I'll stop here, and Birgül will take us through the back experience and its connection with the social movement experience in Turkey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mehmet, for this introduction and laying the background to what I'm going to talk now. Before I talk, I want to say thank you to Mario also organizing and providing us this space, and thank you also everyone who is listening to us online or watching us. I just want to, Judith Butler argues, I quote, "When people gather to resist various forms of state and economic power, they are taking risk with their own bodies, exposing themselves to possible harm. And those, I quote, who gather on the street or in public domains where police are present are always at risk of detention and arrest, but also forcible handling, even death. This is because," she argues, I quote, "all public assembly is haunted by the police and the prison, and every public square is defined in part by the population that could not possibly arrive there. Either they are detained at the border or have no freedom of movement and assembly, or are detained or imprisoned. In other words, the freedom to gather as a people is always haunted by the imprisonment of those who exercise that power, who exercise that freedom and were taken to prison. And when one arrives in public or common spaces with radical and critical views, there is always an anxious or certain anticipated that imprisonment will follow. And sometimes we walk or run knowingly in the direction of prison because it is the only way to expose illegitimate constraints on public assembly and political expression. Everyone, like everyone else, Academic for Peace also knew that all those risks that Judith Butler talks about it were permanent in Turkey. But neither of them, as everyone said that I talked, say they were not expecting to this degree. They thought that a simple act of signing a petition exposing their anger in the dark history of Turkey will be any other activity that will be dismissed, except it didn't. The question to ask, why? Why such a simple act of signing a petition demanding for a peaceful resolution, demanding state involvement and resolution of state involvement and turning to dialogue could be a terrorist act or could be punished? Why such an act has become such a life-changing experience, or in the case of two academics who committed to suicide, life-ending experience. And I think that I just want to, Mehmet talked about how the state immediately, all together with state and non-state institution, attacked. But just to put a perspective into it, I want to read the President Erdogan response just day after to this petition. And he says, I quote, "This mob, which call themselves academic, are blaming the government, and these poor replicas of intellectual unfortunately speak of the state engaging in a massacre. Not only this, they also invite foreigners to monitor developments. This is the mentality of colonialism. Hey, you so-called intellectuals, enlightened ones, you're nothing but dark forces. There is nothing about you that's enlightened. You're so dark and ignorant that you have no idea where the southeast or the east of this country is." And even a mafia leader threatening the academics. We will spill your blood in streams and we will take a shower in your blood. And another newspaper writer, Cem Küçük, writing on 20th of January 2016, this is exactly what we've been trying to explain for the last 3 years. There is no need to reinvent America. Just like in the West, it is necessary to establish civic death mechanisms. In other words, universities should immediately terminate the employment of these academics before prosecutors step in. Those people should not be able to find job again. Their careers should not end. This should not be able to appear in media. Society automatically excludes them. So, and I think if you put in that prospect, one thing perhaps to understand why such an anger is not just treat this as a statement or as a simple text, because it never is a simple text or a statement. And we have to then ask, what does this text reveals or not reveals? And what does it propose or not propose? What does it challenges? And what does it not challenges? And what is radical about it? And we need to locate the text within its both discursive qualities, but also non-discursive qualities, such as history, the context within which it emerged, and what it says, and what relation it is embodied. And this is the kind of thing that I'm going to talk, maybe try to explain the question, why? And then I think in this part, I want to say that the Academic for Peace is historically embedded in the struggle of academics for against the domination, hegemonic domination, control, and discipline, and neoliberalization of education, commodification of education, and the state, like the Mehmet argued, the state use of education as a simple ground for constituting new subject for the new emerging republic. As also Mehmet argued before, the university spaces are central site of contestation, struggle, movement formation in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It is in these campus spaces that a revolutionary movement have emerged. And of course, in response to that, also a state repression and control and discipline heightened. But also, while historically it's embedded with that, but a contemporary social movement struggle, and I think this is really important, I argue that Academics for Peace is not just emerged because of this petition, but it is emerged within in the 2000s when the broader social struggle for social justice and peace started to emerge, and social movements have demanded peace, equality, and democracy, and which was actually kind of manifested with the Gezi Park and the formation of the HDK and the HDP and the women organizations, LGBTQ communities. And in that sense, the Academic for Peace movement is an integral part of this emerging struggle for social justice and peace. Because with the opening in the 2000s and with the opening of the peace movement, there was this realization that what they were experiencing in their spaces of work, either economically, neoliberalization, but also politically, repression, discipline, is one particular expression of injustices that emanating from the same neoliberal economic and political power. And that was a realization that those struggles in these spaces should be also joined with the struggle going elsewhere. And it is within this that the critical intellectual and academics have come to play an important role in these movements, and they have joined them. And in that process of learning and these encounters and being together, they collectively created a new knowledge, it allowed them to share and go observe the violation in different places. It allowed them to see and engage with society. It allowed them to observe what's going on and how violence is experienced in the Kurdish areas. It allowed academics to see the level of trauma that people were going through. It allowed people to see how this daily life that they're far away, these people have experiencing, and things that they have never seen, they've come to see it through these interactions and through these encounters with other social movements and with the Kurdish, with the women. And I think it is that moment that the Academics for Peace emerged and developed and lead to the petition. And the second one, and I think looking into what this particular text says, one needs to really read carefully. In the midst of the brutal violence, it was a deliberate political act that something needs to be done to break this silence, where everyone was remaining silent or closing their eyes to what was going over there. And this is particularly important, not just in Turkey, because the fear is already being created by authoritarian practices, and which was intensified with the failed military coup. There was already a fear of criminalizations, fear of tension, fear of victimization. And I think, but also globally, because of in the context of the Syrian war and refugee crisis, there was a globally silence that no one ever wanted to say anything to what was going over in this conflict. It was in that act of desperation that the academics needed to do something. But it's also not just the academics. I think the academics and the commitment, the collective power of behind this signing embodied and signified not just the autonomous power of academics, but their collective power with the society. This particular petition also radically refuses and challenges what Barış Ünlü calls Turkishness contract, that underlines a particular way of being, knowing, and doing, the fundamental principle of Turkey's national identity since its creation in 1923. But also, I think there was a fear from the government that if they did not block this might turn into potential, this potentially turn into impossibility into possibility. If these radical ideas come to resonate, not just within the campus, but outside, that it can turn into something different. And it was that fear that needed to be crushed. This particular petition also signifies a very radical academic subjectivity subject, breaking the loyalty to the nation and the state society, what Mehmet was saying, a critical intellectual commitment, not only to speak truth to power, but also act upon that idea. But it also challenges this duality between academia somehow isolated from the society or activism, but and sees them as interrelated and mutually dependent to each other. As I said before, it's because of that, it recontextualizes academic injustices and oppression as one particular expression emanating from contemporary economic and political power, and seeks to connect with other diverse struggle for a new democratic, peaceful, and equal Turkey. It's also a radical reconceptualization of Kurdish question as highlighted with this radical positive peace demand, there's always been the official lines that is where the Kurdish question either considered as a terrorism or a security issue or simply a question of underdevelopment. It rather argues that it is not that the importance is not the absence of the violence, but rather changing and reorganizing social structures and power relation in a way that they minimize the possibility of future wars. It also challenges what Mehmet said, this paternalist state mentality and its supremacy over its citizens. And that is, I think, is one of the big problems that the state itself on the court targeted. I mean, that because it's a very important issue in society and social relations. But also it embodies a form of solidarity, and it kind of creates, not only gives the immediate message that you're not alone, but envisages a different relationality and sociability within diverse bodies. And it aims to create a true social cohesion rather than one that is being shaped by polarization and division. So in that vulnerability, despair, and hope, like anyone else, in every situation, violence both challenges, distracts, but also constructs and opens up new possibilities. In this extreme hostile condition, Academic for Peace have come to develop new repertoires of resistance, defense, solidarity organization. And one of them was alternative education and knowledge spaces. It started as a campusler, no campus movement, then developed into different solidarity academies across Turkey and in abroad. And recently, Bir Arada mean together, it's created an umbrella organization to bring together all solidarity academies, and Off University and the Solidarity Academy in Germany is two spaces that has been alternative educational spaces that have been created both to open up spaces for those people who have come from, exiled, and also and sport, and also allow them to carry on their work in those spaces. They also use the court process as space of organization, mobilization, solidarity, sport, and documenting. Not only defending their academic rights and their justices that they have been going through, but also in this course, they turn places where they defend humanity and the goods that are important for humanity. And in that, they created this transnational solidarity process, which Mehmet will talk later, and some of the solidarity because he's involved himself actively. All of these practices, in a sense, allow them to rethink education and educational spaces and education activity, both as a meaning, but also practice. How can we reimagine education and knowledge, both in the way that we're thinking about it, but also the meaning, the practice, and acting upon that? And I think in these alternative education spaces, they've created horizontal, instead of a hierarchical and top-down state institution, formal, where students teach and where teacher is the ultimate knowledge holder and teaches, and the student always kind of recipient. And here is a more horizontal, more participatory and in democratic environment where teacher and student has equal relationship and equally knowledge producer, and then also challenges the formal education, and instead of competition, what it does is focuses on mutual care and sport. And I think by doing that, it is what the Bell Hooks or Judith Butler talks about, how vulnerability, or in Bell Hooks, is marginalization as a site of resistance. And it is through that this new critical subject They have created new critical subject and made education as emancipatory, with the hope that this will turn impossibility into possibility within the cracks of capitalism and authoritarian power. I think I will stop there. I think Mehmet now will talk.
Thank you, Virgül.
You need to stop sharing your screen, but good. Yeah.
Okay, I will follow from where Virgül left. Again, thank you, Virgül, for linking the practice with the critical thinking, critical approach literature on education, agency, and other issues. I will say a few words now about what has been done in the process of resisting against state oppression, some of which Virgül has already mentioned, but I will zoom into a few other examples. In addition to the establishment of academic and alternative horizontal knowledge spaces, I want to emphasize the kind of solidarity we have experienced during this process. Thousands of academics from all over the world has signed petitions, wrote letters to support the Academics for Peace. In the UK, UCU, our union, higher education unions in France, Germany, lend support. That was a valuable source of strength for Academics for Peace. We have also witnessed individual decisions to withdraw cooperation with Turkish higher education bodies like Higher Education Council or the Research Council, and universities who were complicit. We have established the list of complicit universities and the kind of complicity they were involved in, so they acted on that basis. We have also secured emergency funding for academics who were fired and blacklisted from the job market, individual donations, and from international European funding. We have also secured placements for a small number of academics through SAR, CARA, and faculty invitations. This process was important in the sense that we learned about the limits that SAR, CARA, or university departments can do because of the financial constraints and because of sometimes problematic approach to academics at risk. And my main observation here is that these types of interventions are post-mortem interventions. They do not necessarily strengthen the resilience of the higher education system against state oppression. They deal with issues after the fact and with a very small number of the issues at that. We have also witnessed international and national solidarity through monitoring of the trials. It was a torturous process for many academics, but when they saw their colleagues from other countries monitoring the trials, taking the risk to come and stand next to them was a very, very important, valuable source of support for Academics for Peace. There are some links you can look at. I think I will end up with some now concrete examples of alternative or critical spaces for knowledge production and education that the Academics for Peace have started to produce. Birgül, and in my presentation earlier, we mentioned the fact that off-campus solidarity academies were established, but what are they doing? Two projects that I know of, because they were supported by CDPR, of which I am a trustee member, are the Right to the City project in Izmir and the Alternative Encyclopedia of Turkey project in Mersin, but across Turkey as well. The Right to the City project is conceptualized as a project that would not only enable disadvantaged groups and people in Izmir to have access to law when they or their families or friends have been arrested or prosecuted by the government, but also access to transport, access to urban facilities in general. Also, it aims to encourage and build up empowerment of the ordinary people in Izmir. This is funded by European Endowment for Democracy. Sorry, by a funder. I don't know. I don't want to confuse now which one. We have two funders for this. The Alternative Encyclopedia project. Before we come to that, the Izmir Solidarity, the Right to the City project is about academics sharing their knowledge of the movements about the right to the city globally with people in Izmir and learning from the experience and needs of the people in Izmir to generate a new model, a new framework that can be replicated or can be also encouraged in other contexts, in other urban areas. The Alternative Encyclopedia project, again, it is a kind of alternative mode of knowledge production or learning. We aim in this project to produce an alternative encyclopedia of Turkey in terms of history, science, politics, and other aspects. 100 authors will be receiving funding to make contributions to this encyclopedia, which will be then published in different platforms, and it will have an interactive element with it to generate discussion and additions to what is in the original article. It will target higher education, it will target adult education and secondary education. So to sum up, as you can see, the idea that the higher education resilience against state interventions and oppression is an important issue that we need to take into account, take guard against, and this resilience may be partly built within the campus and partly outside the campus. I myself put emphasis on the outside campus alternative institutions and initiatives so that they are competing with the mediocre universities as a source of new knowledge, and B, encouraging further academic criticism within the campus, because those who are persecuted and shut down in that platform can find voice and contribute, maintain their involvement in critical thinking in other platforms. So I value that. That's why I put this on. It's not intended to sort of publicize what we have been doing, but in terms of deriving what lessons we are learning from this. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion at the end. Thank you.
Okay, I just really, in this last part, I just want to ask a few questions and perhaps rethink about ourselves as academics, but also our workspace academia. And I mean, clearly the case of Academic for Peace shows that higher education spaces are crucial sites of crucial sites for formation of new subjectivities, ideas, and politics, and production of new knowledge, either from hegemonic or counter-hegemonic. But it also shows that how higher education space is a battleground for different contested struggles. Spaces of diverse struggles, social transformation, diverse actors competing over to reshape according to their social imaginaries, both in terms of democratic participation, autonomy, freedom, but also state repression, regulation, and control, and often an unequal and uneven power relation and influence. But it also shows how higher education spaces is a constitute part of society with agency and voice rather than an isolated and separated one. Thus, this pushes us to rethink both ourselves as an academic, but also academia in general, and how freedom of thought or academic freedom cannot be meaningful by itself if it's not being related or integrated with the other rights, such as right to education, such as right to live, and right to mother tongue, right to labor and peace. This is really important in the context of Turkey when Mehmet says there's 70,000 students in prison. What would it mean for education or academics to carry on freedom of academia or their freedom at the expense of others? How can you teach a very top-down understanding of subject when your students are being subjected to discrimination, or simply their rights of education or rights education in mother tongue has been discriminated? It is that perspective that we have to think and incorporate freedom of academia to those other freedoms that is needed in the society. And just as a way of finishing, so just think about this question I put forward to it. But I want to finish by a piece, poem by Yanis Ritros, which has been mentioned and quoted by many of the academic for peace in their court defenses. I won't read it, but I will just leave it there. And I'm looking forward to the question and answer session. Thanks, Mario, and thanks, Mehmet.